The wind howled like a wild animal outside my ranch as rain poured down in thick silver sheets. Lightning lit up the sky every few seconds, followed by loud, bone-shaking thunder. The whole town had been warned about the incoming storm, but nobody expected it to hit this hard. I was inside the house with my wife, Sarah, and our two boys, Ethan and Liam, sitting close to the fireplace when everything suddenly went black. Total darkness. The lights cut out, the heater stopped humming, and even the backup generator didn't kick in like it normally should have. "What the?" I muttered, standing up fast. Sarah grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it around the room as the kids clung to her. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a message from our ranch foreman, Tom. They shut off the power to the ranch. HOA sent some guys around back with bolt cutters, cut the main line. Said you were in violation. Whole ranch is dark. Animals panicking. This storm's bad, boss. I stared at the message, stunned, my jaw clenched. They did what? I growled. I rushed to the window and looked out toward the barn. Pitch black. No safety lights. No warmth. And in this storm, with the wind thrashing the trees sideways and the thunder rattling the earth, though it wasn't just cruel, it was dangerous. I ran for the coat rack and threw on my rain jacket. Sarah followed me. "Where are you going?" she asked. "I'm going to fix this," I said through clenched teeth. They don't know who they're messing with. Because what the HOA didn't know, what no one in that smug little committee had even bothered to look up, was that I own the local utility company. Yep, the same one that supplies electricity to every home in this community, including the HOA office, including every one of those committee members' houses. I took one last look at my frightened boys, huddled near their mother. "They want to play dirty," I muttered. "Fine, let's see how they like the dark." But just before I opened the door, the wind slammed something hard against the porch. I heard glass break, and then Sarah screamed. I turned around, heart pounding, and saw our front window shattered inward, the curtains soaked and flapping wildly in the wind. But I didn't have time to check it out because headlights were coming up my long driveway, and the car pulling in had the HOA emblem stuck proudly on the side door. What were they doing back here again? And why were two more trucks following them now? Let me take you back to the beginning, how this all started before the storm ever hit. The trouble began 2 weeks earlier, when I got a letter taped to the ranch gate. It wasn't mailed. It wasn't handed to me. Someone physically walked all the way to my front gate and taped it there with a bright pink sticker on it, like some kind of childish tantrum. It read, "You're in violation of HOA Rule 47C, non-conforming structure. Remove barn extension or face consequences." I laughed when I first saw it. First of all, my ranch was outside the HOA's jurisdiction. I made sure of that when I bought the land years ago. I didn't want to be bothered by lawn rules or mailboxes painted the wrong shade of beige. Second, the barn extension they were talking about. It was a temporary lean-to we built for some rescued animals we were housing strays. Mostly dogs, goats, even a few injured deer the local shelter couldn't care for during the winter. Nothing commercial, just being kind. I called their office immediately. "This is Caleb Wright," I said. "You folks dropped a note on my gate. Just letting you know you have no authority here. I'm not part of your HOA." There was a long silence on the other end. Then a woman's sharp voice said, "We believe your property is still within the boundaries of the revised HOA map." "It's not," I said calmly. "I had it checked by a land use attorney last year. Don't push this. We'll be verifying that ourselves," she snapped and hung up. A few days later, a man in a yellow vest came snooping around my fence line. He took pictures of the barn, then he tried to open the gate to walk in, but my security system buzzed him away. I caught him on camera and posted it online, tagging the HOA. That's when the real trouble began. First came the fines, ridiculous printed notices tossed on my driveway, charging me for imaginary violations like unauthorized fencing and noise pollution from livestock. Then they called animal control and claimed I was keeping illegal pets. That failed when the officer saw how well kept and documented everything was. But it wasn't enough for them. They wanted to punish me. I could feel it brewing. The HOA president, a smug man named Victor Steele, even showed up at the local farmer's market while I was selling produce and tried to shame me in front of customers. "You're setting a bad example, Caleb," he said loudly. "No one is above the community rules. Except I'm not part of your community," I said back, smiling. And last I checked, feeding animals and donating vegetables to local shelters isn't a crime. He walked off, fuming, but something told me he wasn't done. The next day, my ranch sign was vandalized. Someone spray-painted rule breaker across it in red. I didn't even report it. I just fixed it and kept working. But now, as I stood by my shattered window, watching HOA trucks roll up during the worst storm of the year with our power deliberately cut, I knew this had gone too far. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was personal, and they had no idea who they just picked a fight with. Because when I got elected as chairman of the utility board 2 years ago, I quietly bought a majority share in the company that supplies this entire area with power, water, and maintenance. And now, I was going to flip a switch they'd never forget. But just as I reached for the door again, ready to confront whoever stepped out of those trucks, my phone rang. It was Tom, shouting over the wind. "Boss, the animals are breaking fences. One of the bulls is loose, and the barn roof just flew off." I froze. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. People and animals could get seriously hurt, and I had to decide, do I go outside and confront the HOA first, or do I head straight to the barn and save what matters most? And then came the loudest crash yet, followed by the sound of tires skidding, and a scream, a real one, from just outside the house. The scream outside jolted me like an electric shock. I spun around, heart hammering, and yanked open the front door. The wind slammed it against the side of the house as I stepped into the chaos. Rain sliced sideways across my face, and I could barely see through the storm, but I caught the shape of a person lying face down in the mud just a few feet from the porch steps. I ran toward them without thinking, my boots sinking deep into the wet ground, splashing cold water up my legs. As I got closer, lightning flashed, and I saw her. It was a teenage girl, maybe 16 or 17, her clothes soaked, her face covered in mud, and her left leg twisted at an angle that made my stomach turn. One of the HOA trucks was stopped nearby, tilted halfway into a ditch, its front bumper crumpled around a fallen tree. The driver's side door hung open. "Help," the girl whimpered through the wind. "Please." I knelt beside her and shouted back to the house, "Sarah, call 911 now." The boys ran to the window, wide-eyed, as Sarah grabbed her phone and did as I asked. I took off my jacket and covered the girl's shoulders. "You're going to be okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just stay still. Help's coming." That moment shifted everything. The fight with the HOA, the power games, all of it faded as I focused on this injured girl in front of me. A storm raged around us, and there I was, holding the hand of a stranger who had just been caught in the middle of someone else's foolish plan. A flashlight beam appeared through the rain. Tom came running up from the barn, soaked to the bone. "Boss," I saw the crash from the other side. That girl, she was in the back of the truck with the HOA team. Think they were trying to check the transformer near the south fence when the tree fell. I nodded grimly. "One of them is in the ditch. Call the rest of the crew, get them to the barn. Animals are spooked, and the fences are weak." He gave me a quick salute and ran off. Behind me, more people began climbing out of the other HOA vehicles one by one. They looked terrified. Most of them weren't even HOA board members, just hired hands or volunteers, soaking wet and clearly unprepared for what they'd gotten themselves into. One man, probably mid-50s, wearing a poncho with the HOA logo, limped toward me. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he stammered. "They told us you were refusing power inspections, that you were violating some codes. We didn't know you cut power to a ranch with livestock during a storm. You think that's how you handle code enforcement?" I snapped. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, eyes wide. "I didn't know. I was just doing what Steele told us to do." Ah, Victor Steele again, the mastermind behind this idiocy. Sarah rushed out with blankets as I helped the injured girl onto a wooden sled we used for hauling supplies. We couldn't wait for the ambulance, not with trees down everywhere. I hitched the sled to our ATV and drove her down to the lower road, where emergency services could reach us faster. When I got back, the HOA team had gathered near the porch, looking sheepish and frozen. Most of them were apologizing or trying to make themselves scarce, but Victor Steele was nowhere to be found. The coward had disappeared. I stormed back into the house and grabbed my phone. Enough was enough. I didn't call 911. I didn't call the HOA. I called the main control office of the utility company. "Hey, this is Caleb Wright," I said to the engineer on the other end. "Pull power to these addresses: 7475, 7781, and 90 Evergreen Trail." Temporary suspension. Emergency load balancing protocol. Use code RED09. The engineer hesitated. That includes the HOA headquarters and 3 board members' homes. Exactly, I said coldly. Do it. Within 5 minutes, those properties went dark, the same way they'd shut off my ranch. Poetic justice. The following day, the storm passed. We spent the early morning hours helping our neighbors dig out from fallen branches, fixing broken fences, and securing the barn. 2 cows had broken loose, but were thankfully found before they got too far. The girl who had been injured was recovering at the hospital. Her name was Emily, and it turned out she was the daughter of one of the hired temp workers the HOA had brought on for enforcement assistance. She wasn't even supposed to be out in that weather. Meanwhile, Sarah kept checking the neighborhood Facebook group and reading out loud the messages people were posting. Why's my power out? Anyone know what's going on with the HOA office? This is unacceptable. My fridge just shut down. I sat on the porch, sipping my coffee, watching the sun rise over the hills. Sarah glanced at me with a smirk. You going to tell them? Not yet, I replied. Let them feel it for a while. But just as I said that, a shiny black SUV pulled up in front of the ranch gate. It wasn't a tow truck, it wasn't a neighbor, it was something else. 2 men stepped out, suits, earpieces, government plates. They weren't smiling. Sarah stood beside me, gripping my arm. What now? The taller man lifted his badge. Mr. Wright, he said calmly, we need to speak with you immediately. It's about the power outage and some decisions made during last night's storm. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of decisions? The man didn't blink. The kind that affects city infrastructure. We need to talk now. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a neighborhood squabble anymore. Something much bigger was about to begin. The taller man with the badge didn't even flinch as the wind whipped dust around our boots. He held his ground like he was used to storms far worse than this one. We're with the State Utility Commission, he said, flashing his ID again. We received an alert last night that multiple homes, including a public HOA office, were disconnected during a regional emergency protocol, all tied back to your authorization code. I crossed my arms. You're here because I flipped the switch on a few board members who thought it was okay to cut power to a working ranch during a storm, putting my family, my livestock, and their own people at risk. He nodded. We're not here to arrest you, but we are here to investigate. There's concern that your use of the Red 09 override code wasn't properly justified under state-level emergency guidelines. That's a serious issue, Mr. Wright. Sarah stepped up beside me. Are you kidding? Those people could have killed someone. The second agent, shorter, bald, with a notepad, finally spoke up. We're not saying we agree with what the HOA did, but retaliating through infrastructure control raises flags, especially when it causes cascading blackouts. The HOA security building has a backup generator, but some of the homes affected had elderly residents, medical equipment, babies. I clenched my jaw. I hadn't considered that. I was too angry last night, too driven by what they did to us, to think about collateral damage. I didn't shut down the entire grid, I said carefully. Just 5 properties, temporary, 15 minutes, all within legal thresholds under my emergency control authority. I've done this before. Just never to civilians. That's the issue, said the taller one. These weren't commercial clients or facilities. They were private residences. I was targeted first, I said. That barn? It collapsed hours after they cut my power. We had animals inside. My sons were in that house with no heat, and one of their own, Emily, nearly died when their truck slid into a ditch outside my property. The 2 men glanced at each other. She's in the hospital? The shorter one asked. Broken leg. Hypothermia. If I hadn't pulled her out, you'd be talking to a coroner right now. They were quiet for a while. Then the tall one nodded. We're going to file a report. We'll need written statements, photos, timestamps, everything you've got. We're not saying you're in the wrong, Mr. Wright, but we need to be thorough. This isn't over. And just like that, they turned and left. As the SUV rolled away, Sarah turned to me. They're right, she said softly. What Victor and the HOA did was disgusting. But don't become like them. You've always stood for doing things the right way. I sighed. She was right, as always. But this wasn't over. That afternoon, Tom and I drove into town to check on the transformer, where the HOA claimed they had inspection rights. Turns out, big surprise, it wasn't even theirs to inspect. The property line clearly placed it on my land, tied to my private grid. But someone had tampered with the panel badly. The wires had been stripped, casing left open to the rain. It was a miracle it didn't catch fire, Tom muttered. I've seen cleaner work from raccoons. We reported the damage to the sheriff's office, who logged it as criminal trespass and vandalism. Still no sign of Victor Steele. He hadn't shown up at the HOA building all day. Word on the street was that he was out of town. Coward. Back at the ranch, life was trying to get back to normal. The boys helped restack hay, and Sarah baked cookies for the volunteers who showed up with extra tarps and nails. Neighbors, ones who weren't even that close, came to lend a hand. A few even admitted they never liked the HOA and wanted to know more about what really happened. That evening, just as the sun dipped low behind the trees, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up the drive. Out stepped Sheriff Daniel Harper, a big guy with a slow drawl and a smart eye for trouble. "Caleb," he said, tipping his hat. "Heard you had quite the rodeo up here." I laughed bitterly. "Yeah, and I'm still not sure if it's over." "Well," he said, pulling a folded sheet from his coat, "you might want to see this." He handed me an official report. Victor Steele's signature was scrolled across the top. It was a filed complaint against me. Claim: intentional sabotage of HOA infrastructure, unlawful control of regional electric supply, personal threats to HOA representatives. Sheriff Harper raised a brow. He filed this 2 hours before vanishing. Seems like he's trying to cover his tracks. I couldn't help but laugh. He's accusing me of sabotage after he sent people onto my land to cut my power lines. Harper folded his arms. "We're launching an official investigation, but I'll tell you straight. I've known you for years, Caleb. You're the guy who donates eggs to the food pantry and mows old Miss Clara's lawn when her kids forget to visit. But this is politics now. HOA boards, full of snakes. Steele has friends in places you don't want to meet." I stared at the complaint form for a long moment. "Let them dig," I said. "I've got video. I've got evidence. I've got a hospital report from the girl they endangered. They want to play dirty? I've got cleaner hands and a bigger file." The sheriff nodded. "Just don't let it drag you down. You've got good folks depending on you." He climbed into his cruiser and left. I walked back to the porch and stood quietly for a while, watching the sunset. Sarah joined me, wrapping a blanket around our shoulders. "You okay?" she asked. "No," I said, "but I'm focused." That night, I opened my laptop and started writing an email not to the HOA, not to the sheriff, to the state attorney general's office, with everything I had: video, photos, statements, power grid records, and a timeline that showed the exact moment they cut us off and exactly what happened afterward. I wasn't just fighting for my ranch anymore. I was going after the whole HOA. But just as I clicked send, a new message popped up on my screen. Subject: urgent HOA internal leak. I clicked it. Inside was a single sentence. They knew it was illegal and did it anyway. I have proof. Meet me tomorrow. No name, no signature, no clue who sent it. Just a time, a place, and a trail that might change everything. The message had no sender name, just a burner email address with random letters and numbers. I stared at it for a long moment, my finger hovering over the delete key, but something stopped me. The words "they knew it was illegal and did it anyway." That line hit me like a punch in the gut. Whoever sent this, they weren't guessing they knew, and they were offering to prove it. The meeting place was strange. The old barn behind the decommissioned grain mill on Pine Hollow Road, just outside town. The time, 9:30 p.m. sharp. That was less than 24 hours from now. Sarah sat across the table, quietly watching me. She could tell something was off. "You've got that storm's not over look," she said gently. I turned the laptop toward her and showed her the message. She read it twice, then looked up. "You think it's real?" "I don't know," I said. "Could be bait, could be one of Steele's people trying to set me up. Or it could be someone trying to help," she added. "Someone tired of the HOA's garbage." I nodded. "Either way, I'm going." "Then you're not going alone." At exactly 9:20 p.m. the next night, I pulled into the cracked gravel lot behind the abandoned grain mill. The place looked like something out of an old western, dark, creaky, forgotten, but I knew it well. Before it shut down, it used to be one of my biggest corn buyers. Tom sat beside me in the truck, a flashlight and walkie in hand. He wasn't happy about the plan, but he backed me anyway. "If this turns sideways, I'm calling the sheriff," he warned. "And if anyone so much as sneezes weird, I'm putting the truck in reverse." "Fair," I said. I stepped out and walked toward the barn, boots crunching on loose stone. My breath puffed in the cold air as I reached the rusted door. It creaked open before I could even knock. Inside, it was dark. One single hanging bulb swayed slightly from a beam above, casting long, shaky shadows. And then, from behind a stack of old hay bales, a figure stepped out. A woman, late 30s, dark ponytail, jeans and a windbreaker. She looked nervous but determined. "You're Caleb, right?" she asked. "Yeah," I said carefully. "Who are you?" "My name's Rachel. I used to work for the HOA." My mind started turning. "Used to." "I was a compliance officer," she said quickly. "Victor hired me last year. I only stayed 6 months. Thought I'd be helping with parking permits and garden disputes, basic stuff. But that's not what they're doing anymore." She pulled a folder out of her jacket and handed it to me. Inside were printouts, photos, and what looked like internal emails, all stamped with HOA letterhead. "Victor's been expanding HOA boundaries illegally," she said quietly. "Redrawing property maps, claiming land that isn't theirs. They've been forging community consent records and getting kickbacks from contractors who build fences and pave roads in those fake zones." I flipped through the pages, my stomach twisting. There it was, my ranch, drawn into a new zoning proposal with the note, "Non-compliant structure targeted for utility enforcement if objections persist." Rachel pointed to that line. "This wasn't about a barn. This was about silencing you, making an example of someone who wouldn't play along. They cut my power in a storm," I said quietly. "Endangered my kids, injured one of their own." Rachel nodded. "And that's why I left. I couldn't be part of it anymore. I tried to talk to the board, but Victor controls everything. If you push back, you get blacklisted or worse. But if you go public with this," she said, gesturing to the folder, "you can bury them." Before I could respond, a loud crack echoed from outside. Gunshot. Rachel ducked, and I instinctively pulled her behind the nearest beam. My walkie crackled to life in my pocket. "Boss, someone just shot out the truck window. I'm circling around the mill." "Get down," my heart thundered. Was it Steele? Had someone followed her? We waited in silence for what felt like forever. Then headlights swept across the far wall of the barn. I peeked out and saw Tom's truck speeding around the side. "Let's move," I shouted, grabbing Rachel by the arm. We bolted from the barn and dove into the truck, just as Tom hit the gas. A second gunshot rang out, hitting the ground just behind us, but we didn't stop. We drove like hell out of there and didn't slow down until we were halfway back to the ranch. Rachel was shaking but alive. "You okay?" I asked, glancing at her in the back seat. She nodded. "They're scared, Caleb. They're watching everything. Victor must have tapped one of my old devices." I looked at the folder in my hands. This was bigger than just the HOA. They were committing fraud, abusing power, and now, possibly, attempted assault. Back at the ranch, we put Rachel in the guest room under Sarah's watch, and I scanned every page of her documents. By morning, I had 3 copies saved to USB drives. One would go to my attorney, one to the sheriff, and one to a local reporter who'd been sniffing around the HOA for months. But just as I sat down to email the files, a new email popped up. Subject: urgent injunction, stop all action. It was from Victor Steele, and attached was a court document. The HOA was suing me full-blown civil suit, claiming I had stolen power, harmed public safety, and interfered with HOA governance. They wanted my ranch seized and my control over the utility company stripped. I sat back in my chair, stunned. They were trying to take everything, but they didn't know I wasn't going to fight this alone anymore, because I had something stronger than their lies, the truth, and a community that had finally seen their real faces. Still, I knew one thing for sure. If they were pulling legal moves this big, then Victor Steele was about to do something even worse. I could feel it, and I was right. Because 2 days later I woke up to sirens, flashing lights at my gate, and a full SWAT team pointing rifles at my front door. I threw on my boots and ran out the front door with my hands raised high. "Don't shoot! This is private property," I yelled over the sound of tires crunching on gravel and radios crackling. The red and blue lights from the SWAT trucks lit up the entire ranch like a crime scene. Officers in full tactical gear surrounded the house, weapons drawn. One of them shouted, "Caleb Wright, step forward slowly with your hands where we can see them." Sarah was at the door behind me, holding the boys tight. She looked terrified. "I'm Caleb Wright," I called out, keeping my voice calm. "What is this about?" One of the SWAT members motioned me forward, his rifle steady. A tall man in a dark suit, stepped out from a black SUV parked near the gate. He looked like a lawyer straight off a crime show, expensive shoes, slicked back hair, a leather folder tucked under one arm. "I'm Robert Glenn," he said as he walked toward me, flanked by two officers. "I'm the court-appointed receiver. As of this morning, by emergency injunction, this property is under HOA supervision until pending legal matters are resolved." "What legal matters?" I asked, gritting my teeth. "The HOA filed an emergency lawsuit," Glenn said smoothly. "They claimed you illegally accessed and manipulated utility infrastructure, endangering the public. The court agreed that temporary control needed to be established. This ranch, the house, and all connected properties are frozen, effective immediately." "You sent a SWAT team for that?" I growled. "It was a precaution," Glenn replied coldly. "There were claims of threats, unauthorized firearms, and unstable livestock conditions. The judge felt it warranted action. I could feel my blood boiling. This was Victor's doing a desperate move from a desperate man. And now my wife and kids were watching our home get invaded like we were criminals. "I have proof this is retaliation," I said, barely holding it together. "I have files, witnesses, whistleblowers. The HOA has been forging maps and sending people onto my land. One of them nearly killed a girl during that storm." Glenn raised an eyebrow. "Then I suggest you bring that evidence to court. In the meantime, you and your family need to vacate the house until the receiver completes a full inspection." "Where are we supposed to go?" Sarah asked, stepping forward, her voice shaking. "We've arranged temporary lodging at the Sunridge Inn," he said, handing me a paper. "A patrol unit will escort you there now. Please cooperate, Mr. Wright. This doesn't have to get worse." Worse. They'd already cut my power, sued me, and now they were kicking my family off our own land. I took the boys' hands and led them inside. We packed what we could in under 10 minutes while armed officers stood guard on our porch. Rachel helped carry out bags, her face pale and angry. "This is a setup," she whispered. "They're trying to erase the evidence before it goes public." I nodded grimly. "Then we need to move faster." We drove out with a police escort. As we pulled away, I looked back at the ranch, my ranch now swarming with people in vests and suits. It didn't feel real. At the Sunridge Inn, I got to work. I emailed the full whistleblower file to my attorney, the state utility board, and that local reporter I'd been holding back on, Jessica Monroe from Channel 14. She was known for biting back hard at corrupt officials, and if anyone could blow this open, it was her. By the next morning, it had already begun. Jessica aired a segment titled HOA Power Grab. Landowner accuses HOA of fraud and retaliation after storm cut off. They played part of the barn surveillance footage showing the HOA truck crew cutting power lines, then the time-stamped email from Victor Steele ordering it. The online response was instant. People were furious. Comments flooded the HOA's website. Who gave them the right? They endangered a child during a storm. I live nearby. This man always helped our community. This is sick. That same morning, my lawyer filed a motion to dissolve the court injunction based on fraudulent claims and endangerment of public safety. But while we waited for the court to act, things at the ranch took a darker turn. Tom called from his truck, watching the property from the old fire road near the ridge. "Caleb," he said quietly, "you're not going to believe what they're doing." "What now?" I sighed. "They're moving crates into the barn," he said. "Big ones, covered in tarps. Not from any utility company I've ever seen." I zoomed in. They've got private contractor logos. Not official. Some kind of shell outfit. My stomach dropped. "They're planting something," I muttered. "What do you want me to do?" "Stay hidden. Record everything." Meanwhile, Rachel was digging into her old emails. She found something explosive. An internal HOA memo discussing a long-term development plan that included a luxury retreat center on reclaimed HOA land. And guess what? My ranch was marked as Phase 1. "They're trying to steal your land and flip it," Rachel said. "That's what this whole thing is. It was never about rules. It was about greed." That night, I met with Jessica Monroe in person at her studio. She wanted to do a full sit-down interview. "You sure you want to go on record?" she asked. "This could blow the lid off the whole HOA." I looked into the camera as they began rolling. "My name is Caleb Wright. I'm a rancher, a father, and a business owner. My land was stolen under false pretenses. My family was endangered. The people who are supposed to protect our neighborhoods have turned into predators. and I'm not going to stay silent. The interview aired live. Within hours, it went viral. People all over the country started sharing it. Ex-HOA members came forward, lawyers, victims of similar scams, and the pressure started building on Victor Steele. By the next day, the sheriff showed up again, this time not to shut me down, but to investigate the HOA. And just when I thought the tide was turning, Rachel got a message from an unknown number. She stared at it for a long time, then slowly looked up at me. "It's from one of Victor's people," she said quietly. "He says we have 12 hours to drop everything and walk away, or he's going to make sure you're never seen again." And then her phone buzzed again with a live photo. It was my ranch, a drone shot of my house with red laser dots aimed at the window where my sons were playing. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just legal anymore. It was war. My whole body went numb. The drone photo, taken just minutes ago, showed those red laser sights like glowing dots of pure evil hovering over my son's playroom window. I snatched the phone from Rachel, staring at it, rage bubbling in my chest. They were threatening my kids. "This is beyond anything," Sarah whispered, eyes wide with fear as I showed her the picture. "Caleb, we have to get them out of here." I nodded, already calling Sheriff Harper. "Daniel, they've gone too far." I barked into the phone. "They're using drones, targeting my family." "I just got a live threat. I'm texting you the photo now." There was a pause on the line. Then the sheriff answered, low and serious. "Stay exactly where you are. I'm sending my deputies to you, and I'm dispatching 2 units to the ranch right now. If this is what I think it is, we're about to bring the hammer down." Within 10 minutes, law enforcement arrived at the Sun Ridge Inn in force. Sarah, the boys, Rachel and I were escorted under armed protection to a safe house just outside county lines, a modest cabin in the woods, no cell towers, no drones, no neighbors. While deputies secured us, Tom sent me a text, "Caleb, I stayed hidden. I followed the trucks. You won't believe where they went." He dropped a pin not on HOA grounds, but on a remote warehouse just outside city zoning, a place known for shady dealings. No cameras, no paperwork. I forwarded the info to Harper, who already had a warrant ready, thanks to Jessica's story and the stack of evidence we'd shared. The sheriff was tired of the HOA's reign of fear, and with this drone threat, they had crossed a line even the most corrupt judge wouldn't defend. Meanwhile, Jessica's second interview aired that night. This time she included Rachel and the screenshots, the fake HOA expansion map, the altered land use documents, the financial records showing kickbacks to board members from shady construction firms. Rachel's testimony on live TV was calm, steady, and absolutely damning. "The man behind all of this," she said, "is Victor Steele. He has been orchestrating a land grab disguised as code enforcement. And when Mr. Wright refused to give in, they retaliated." Across the nation, outrage exploded. "Free the ranch" trended online. Civil rights attorneys offered their services for free. Even a U.S. senator commented, demanding the HOA be investigated for abuse of power and endangering citizens. The next morning, just after dawn, the sheriff's department raided the warehouse Tom had tracked. What they found: enough to shatter the HOA's operation permanently. Stacks of equipment, surveillance drones, bolt cutters, forged signage, blank HOA violation slips, even a binder labeled ranch strategy. Inside it, pictures of my house, my barn, my family. That was it. Game over. Harper moved fast. Victor Steele was arrested later that evening, trying to flee the state. He was found at a private airport with a duffel bag, stuffed with cash and fake IDs. Charges came down like a hailstorm: conspiracy, fraud, reckless endangerment, illegal surveillance, and attempted intimidation with intent to cause bodily harm. His entire board resigned within 24 hours. The emergency court injunction was dissolved instantly, and my ranch was restored to me without a single condition. The first thing I did when we returned was walk to the front gate, pull down the fake HOA warning sign they'd nailed in weeks ago, and toss it in the fire pit. Neighbors lined the driveway. People I barely knew brought warm food, tools, and hugs. Even the mayor visited to apologize. But it was the quiet moments that meant the most. When my boys played again in the yard without fear. When Sarah slept through the night without checking the locks 3 times. And when Tom stood beside me in the barn and said, "You never back down, boss." That's what made the difference. Rachel stayed in town. The community helped her find work at a nearby law firm that had taken an interest in helping others wronged by HOA corruption. She was a hero in her own right, and she saved more lives than she'll ever know. As for Jessica Monroe, she won a journalism award 6 months later. Her 2-part HOA Exposed series became required viewing in media schools across the country. And me? I still run my ranch, still grow crops, still care for animals. Only now. I also sit on a new community advisory board, one that helps people understand their rights and push back against unchecked HOA power. I never asked to be a fighter, but when they brought the fight to my doorstep, they forgot one thing: you don't mess with a man who owns the power grid, and you definitely don't threaten his family and think you'll get away with it. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more jaw-dropping HOA battles and true life tales from America's backyards. Stay tuned, more shocking stories are coming your way on this channel.